introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank Asia Society, the AIM, InsightGov, FSGO, of which I have the honor to be a member, and other supporting organizations for inviting me to be a panelist at this forum in my capacity as a member of the informal group of experts on the West Philippine Sea. It certainly is both a privilege and a pleasure to share the platform with Chito Romana, former Secretary Rafael Alunan, and Henry Bensurto, who are all good friends and really colleagues on this interesting topic. I want to make clear that I'm speaking in my personal capacity and not as an official representative of the informal group of experts on the West Philippine Sea. I should like to make it clear that this afternoon I'm speaking as a plain Filipino citizen, retired from public life, who also pays her taxes regularly, able to talk frankly without fear or favor about aspects of the West Philippine Sea. I shall be focusing my talk mainly on the Philippine situation because I believe this is important before we become distracted by what is happening outside the country. I shall use some of the main recommendations on the white paper, which I think is going to be distributed to you, and which I hope you will find useful to read. And also will use my working experience with earlier related issues to the West Philippine Sea. Early on the presidency of President Aquino, the issue of the West Philippine Sea loomed large, not only as a major foreign policy issue, but an actual threat to the nation's security and the people's well-being. Perhaps no other contemporary issue in the Aquino administration has shaken the country to its foundations and has made a few sectors of the population, rich or poor, educated or illiterate, aware of the fragility of the Republic. The West Philippine Sea issue is one of those defining issues of our history, which could unite our diversified country or destroy its social fabric, which could transform us into a respected sovereign republic, or trap us into remaining an obedient, smiling vassal of bigger powers. Thanks to Chinese aggressive tactics, we still might forge an independent foreign policy as recommended in our Constitution. The West Philippine Sea issue has made us aware what many of us do not recognize or do not wish to recognize, that we are an archipelago, that is, we are a water country, where its more than 7,000 islands are united by water and not by a land mass. Our typhoons, our diet, our livelihood, our transportation, our accidents, our deaths, our capacity to migrate and roam the world have their roots in the waters which surround us. The acceptance of this basic premise is important in understanding and appreciating the implications of the challenge China has now thrown to us. We are a maritime people and a maritime country whose islands are in the embrace of two vast bodies of water, the Pacific Ocean to our east and the South China Sea to our west. Although there are many determinants to development, in the case of the Philippines, geography shapes partly our past, present, and future. In other words, geography does much to shape our national destiny. There's no time this afternoon to go back to our long and ancient history as a maritime people, although our researchers should delve more deeply into this topic. We cannot claim to have the records of imperial China, but I'm sure researchers at this point in time will find new evidence of our long-term maritime activities and maritime way of life. But let's fast forward to the present. In the media and government press releases, a common starting point of the West Philippine Sea conflict is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which took place in Caracas, Venezuela from 1973 to 1982, which gives the impression that maritime issues for the Philippines are of recent vintage, which of course is not true at all. But the UNCLOS is a necessary starting point for the Philippines, so I shall use it this afternoon. As a career officer in the Department of Foreign Affairs, assigned to the Office of the United Nations and international organizations, I had to deal administratively with the preparations for the participation of the Philippines in the Conference on the Law of the Sea, as well as to finalize the Philippine delegation list attending the conference for the approval of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs onto Malacanang for the final approval of then President Marcos. I was impressed at the consistently high quality of our delegation, as well as the regularity of the attendance at this decade-long conference. The head of the delegation was invariably the late Senator Arturo Tolentino, then a member of the Batasan Pambansa. And he was accompanied by legal luminaries like Vicente Abad Santos, Jose Ingles, Estelito Mendoza, fisheries specialists like Mario Manansala, and as well as other competent DFA career officers like Alejandro Yango and the future Ambassador Lauro Baja. As Filipinos, we should not forget this historic fact, because it was the Philippine delegation which introduced the archipelagic doctrine into the conference, and which fought hard at the conference for its acceptance by the world body, including the concept that the baselines of an archipelago should be measured from its farthest points, thereby giving an archipelago an expanded 200-mile exclusive economic zone, giving the Philippines regulatory jurisdiction over 2 million square meters of water and the seabed underneath. As our white paper says, without the archipelagic concept enshrined in UNCLOS, the Philippines would have remained a scattering of islands separated by the high seas. For the first time in the history of mankind, there was adopted in Caracas a maritime regime which laid down rules on the conduct on the seas of members of the convention, and in particular guidance for states with overlapping jurisdictional claims, who may then resort to a range of peaceful settlement of dispute mechanisms. Although this was a triumph for the rule of law and of a new maritime world order, it has to be remembered that UNCLOS is a very new law, that it has to be interpreted and reinterpreted, that it has to be tested and proven right, and that we in the Philippines, as a maritime country, and as a signatory to the convention, has the obligation to put into practice its principles, even to test its practicability if necessary, before we decide to go formally to the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, or ITLAWS. It is not enough to keep constantly repeating, as we read in the papers, to a rules-based approach, as if the UNCLOS would automatically come to our aid or rescue us from hot waters. We have to make specific references in the law and cite examples in our own historical experience based on scientific data as a maritime country in the face of challenges from other interested parties. In other words, we must have our own legal experts and maritime technicians to give flesh and blood to UNCLOS. President Aquino gave the Filipino people a great slogan for the West Philippine Sea issue when he courageously declared, "What is ours is ours." But this slogan should have been further explained officially by his team to the world and to our own people in relation to what our claims really mean as an archipelago. The issues involved in the West Philippine Sea are cross-cutting, complex, and multidimensional. Leading the West Philippine Sea issue to a successful end is like leading a vast symphony orchestra with many players who must accept and respect their own entrances and exits, including those who do back-channeling, under a conductor who has well studied his or her musical score. I do not wish to underestimate the difficulties posed by this major effort, nor do I wish to belittle the work that has been done. Because of the complexity of the West Philippine issue, our informal group of experts entitled their paper thus, "Towards a Strategic Framework for Management of the West Philippine Sea." The key words there are strategic framework and management. because there has to be an overriding purpose that is our national interest, which must be achieved, and there must be coordination among the many actors and actresses who must work within a framework. The need for a national team approach, the coordination of work of several offices to realize larger but interrelated goals, achieving goals beyond individual priorities or beyond the claims of particular offices are evident when the group of experts gave priority to three imperatives of the West Philippine Sea, and I should like to mention them here. 1, sustainable development of the marine economy and resources. 2, promoting maritime security and defense. And 3, law enforcement and contributing to a good order at sea. The group saw the need to formulate basic policies on three imperatives, and also recognized that while there may have been policies formulated, these policies in the actual experience of the members of the group were not coordinated nor implemented because of lack of budget, staff, follow-up, or even lack of interest. The homely sounding phrase housekeeping tasks was often used at our meetings to indicate the priority domestic jobs which have to be tackled before we could deal with the challenges coming from abroad. What is the present structure of the bureaucracy of government to meet the new challenges now unleashed by China? I hope I shall not be talking on the topic which Mr. Bensurto will speak about, but I hope he will not mind if I say it is at present inadequate and ineffective. But let us go back to recent history, for we might find some positive solutions. When UNCLOS was signed in 1981, and the Philippines was one of the earliest and most eager signatories to this convention, a cabinet committee under President Marcos on the law of the sea was created with the participation of government agencies responsible for matters dealt with in the convention. It seems, however, as if the earliest focused approach of the Marcos government unraveled during its last crumbling years. During the Cory Aquino administration, the major activity related to UNCLOS was the attempt to pass the certified Senate Bill number 206, entitled An Act to Define the Archipelagic Baselines of the Philippines. The bill, of which I was the sponsor, failed passage, mainly because there were more important priorities for the administration then, and because there was no organized government structure which should give sustained support for the passage of the bill into law. That China was quiet about the South China Sea during this period, during the Cory Aquino administration, when Deng Xiaoping was implementing his revolutionary policy of combining communism with a free market economy in some related domestic zones, is significant and should be the subject of serious research from our side. Serious research should also be made by our academics on questions such as: 1, since China attended the conference on the law of the sea, what position did it take as a future signatory of the convention? On the same note, why does not China refer at all to the UNCLOS? Second, another topic is that the People's Republic of China derived its position, as said by Professor Batong Bakal, that the People's Republic of China derived its position on the 9-dash line from the Republic of China when it was in power under Chiang Kai-shek. Mistakes could have been made in the chaotic transition to a new political regime. This situation needs careful examination. When UNCLOS finally came into force in 1994 under the Ramos administration, a new cabinet cluster was formed and named the Cabinet Committee on Marine and Ocean Affairs. With territorial conflicts arising in the Kalayaan group of islands and Mischief Reef, the Cabinet Cluster on Security of the Ramos administration worked with the CABCOM MOA to look for cross-cutting solutions. The Arroyo administration experienced the need and the pressure to prepare for the passage of a baselines law. the deadline for submission to the United Nations being May 2010. To address this priority, the Commission on Maritime and Ocean Affairs was formed and transferred from the Department of Foreign Affairs and became based in the Office of the President. It was composed of the Executive Secretary as chair, the Secretary of Justice and Foreign Affairs as vice chairs. Then with the following members, the list really leads like an alphabet soup. You have DND, DENR, DBM, the OTC, the OT, DTI, NAMRIA, the Philippine Coast Guard. The DFA remained the lead agency and the secretariat to the Commission on Maritime and Ocean Affairs. With the passage of Republic Act number 9522, which defined our baselines, the pressure seemed to be off again on government to carefully guard our maritime boundaries. In other words, this is how somehow government responds to this long-term issue of the law of the sea. If there is pressure from the outside, there is response. If there is none, there is no response. And I believe this is one of the weaknesses of the Philippine government. In 2011, President Aquino abolished the Commission on Maritime and Ocean Affairs, and in its place, through EO 37, created the National Coast Guard Watch Council, envisaged to provide strategic direction and policy guidance primarily for maritime security affairs. Although the new mandate of the Coast Guard might have improved its operational capability and interagency coordination, there is at present an absence of a broader policy-making mechanism in view of the succession of critical events affecting the West Philippine Sea. It is shortly after the creation of the National Coast Guard Watch System that China targeted the Philippines with its offensive on the Scarborough Shoal. It's in rapid succession, the Philippine government, in particular, Malacanang in the DFA, had to put out menacing brush fires which came after the Scarborough Shoal standoff, such as the absence of a final ASEAN communique at the Foreign Ministers Summit in July this year due to division among ASEAN members on the method of handling China on matters relating to the South China Sea in July. Also, the failure of the ASEAN Summit of Heads of State and Governments to arrive at a common position on territorial disputes on the South China Sea at its November 21 to 22 meetings. China stamping the passport of its citizens with its national map, which includes the 9-dash line, with the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, and India protesting such action. And also the announcement by Hainan province, which administers China's claims in the South China Sea, that would intercept and search ships in the South China Sea, a move which goes against the international principle of freedom of navigation. In the meantime, China successfully launches its first aircraft carrier, enormously increasing its offense and defense capabilities on the high seas, and selects a new president, Xi Jinping, and a new prime minister, Wen Jiabao, to lead the country, whose policy directions remain a guessing game to outsiders of the Communist Party. In this new heightened crisis situation, nothing much, unfortunately, has changed on our domestic front. We still lack experts on the law of the sea who will stay on in this country and serve the Philippines, whether in government or in academia, because they really begin to work outside the country after they begin to be experts on the law of the sea. We also lack expertise on strategic studies due to rapidly shifting geostrategic environment, which includes knowledge in energy, telecommunications, space, etc. Despite our geographic closeness to China, we also do not have trained Chinese specialists and who speak the language adequately. Because of the principle of rotation between the home office and assignments and abroad, It is difficult to develop specialists in China in the DFA, as well as specialists on the law of the sea. Perhaps those who become specialists on the West Philippine Sea should not be assigned abroad and should be placed in a special category in the DFA, where their salaries and possibility of promotion is equal to that of a foreign service officer. Also, there must be a serious effort to second some of our academics and diplomats to go for training in the United Nations Secretariat of the Law of the Sea, where they will learn the art of negotiations which go between member states of the UNCLOS. In addition, there are no independent think tanks in our country to deal with strategic concerns, yet there are gifted, retired ambassadors eager to be reharnessed to work pro bono if only the right conditions exist. I should like to take the opportunity to congratulate the President for his timely intervention at the conclusion of the Japan-ASEAN Summit in Cambodia, when he raised his hand and openly told Prime Minister Hun Sen that he disagreed that there was an ASEAN consensus not to internationalize the South China Sea issue as claimed by the Prime Minister of Cambodia, since there was no such consensus. This is the kind of sound judgment and quick action which you need when dealing with China and its allies. However,